let's get this meeting started.
Okay. I'm at a county board meeting. That's right. Okay.
Okay, we're going to call this meeting to order, and we have one resolution, which is the contract award for the Federal Representation Services. Can I get a motion to get this on the floor? Jimmy, second Steve. Okay, Shauna, you want to give us an overview?
Sure, thank you very much. Scott did obviously a great job in his agenda briefing, detailing out all the different components, but I'll just give a real high overview for those at home. So what we have before you is a contract award for Federal Representation Services, or our federal lobbyist. We do currently have a state lobbyist, and so we do not, however, have a federal lobbyist. While we do have good working relationships with both congressmen and senators, we are lacking in a comprehensive federal legislative agenda. So that is the intent of this, is to get us some help in that area. And to kind of streamline our approach with that. With the reintroduction of earmarks, we are competing against other jurisdictions for those dollars, and so this will help us get in front of the right people at the right time. We did issue, with Chairman Dillon had asked us to issue an RFP, or a request for proposals, and along with the support of some other board members. So the committee reviewing those proposals, we did submit them to 12 firms, and they were also put out for anyone else that wanted to go ahead and provide a proposal. We received 3 back, and so Chairman Dillon, Vice Chairwoman Williams, Member Daly, Member Ricker, Scott, and myself sat on that committee. We did interviews with each of the firms. We rated based upon the 7 criteria. We had a scope of 7 main items. And so through that process, we landed on the recommendation before you today, which is to go with Cozen, and they also submitted the lowest pricing. I did want to add, there's no budget amendment before you today for this. We did include funding for that in the 2024 budget, so that's been taken care of. And this contract award, we're recommending a 3-year deal with some options to renew. The first year is $92,000, the second year is $96,000, and the third year would be $96,000. And that is actually less than what we had budgeted, so we're seeing some savings there.
Member Daly.
I wanted to be sure that we amended the resolution to include the cost. I don't think we should ever be voting on something we don't have in front of us the exact dollar cost of. So thank you for including that, Shauna.
So you're making a motion?
Yes, I am.
Okay, to amend.
I move.
Rob, would you like to second that? Okay. Are there any comments on the amendment? Oh, the green sheet, and it's in the red, what we added. Rob?
I just wanted to ask you a couple questions just for clarity. Is there an annual evaluation of how the contract is going, and then is there a way for us to break it if it's not going well?
Yes, so we will, obviously, in any contract that we do, we have some out clauses, so if we're not satisfied with those services, we can do that. That is also another reason why we did a 3-year with an option to renew. If things are going well and we want to continue to renew, we will do that. And then there'll be some, obviously, some performance indicators and things like that.
Any additional questions? Jennifer?
Do we have any details included as to what they will be doing, helping in terms of the grant-making strategy in the event they have to go that route?
Do you want me to handle that? I'm sorry. Okay. I don't have specifics here before me today. Obviously, they will assist us in getting, we'll determine our legislative, the way I understand it, we'll determine our legislative priority, and then if there's other projects or things within those priorities that have some grant-making dollars, maybe earmarks aren't available, but we can get some grants, then they will get us in front of those right agencies. We do have a number of individuals on staff that already write for a lot of those grants, and so they would be assisting us with that or being able to steer us to someone that can help. I don't know specifically, I don't recall how much of that they will be doing for us versus putting us with the right people, but I can definitely get that answer for you.
I think I was more wondering, how are we going to assess if they're identifying them in the right timeframes, or if we're looking back going, gosh, I wish we would have known.
Jimmy, go ahead.
So, all good questions, and I think that's why the original review committee took a step back. Originally, the idea was for us to decide after interviews, and honestly, the way some of them talked about grants, I know I personally left more confused and made the comment, I know to the members on the committee, if we can't even discuss what we want, we don't make a very good client. So all the proposals basically came in, and that was one of the questions, Rob. So all of them, after the 08-09 scenario where you were locked into contracts, all have offered 30-day out clauses. And that was one of the questions. I know Member Daly had brought that up, and so that was one of the 10 different questions. One firm had like 11 questions that was asked to them, and we asked for written responses after the first interview. All the proposals basically have, so sometimes in the past we've struggled on making clear what our federal program and ask should be, and most of them, I said, identified. I'll use COSN for example, and one of the point persons on that was former Congressman Davis from Illinois, and too many times local municipalities ask for said road project, but they don't know how to ask or how to properly prepare the paperwork, or that ask is dead on arrival. You need to ask for this program in there. So most of the firms basically said that they would come to, they all said that they're going to come to Peoria probably for a few days, do deep dives with our staff, program heads, board members, and ask for the things. So when we got about grants, we had talked about maybe just doing grants, but as I was explained, if you don't know what to ask for properly, you don't know really what to go for. And I know Congressman LaHood's office does a very good job of sending grants out on a weekly basis that the federal program can identify, but they're really going to come in and do a deep dive on the organization and help us build a program from the bottom up so that we can have and help prepare, get it to the right staffers. And I think we decided basically, you know, what are our expectations is our return on our value for this contract, because we do have a couple things in the pipeline right now, but we've been missing on some other things. And then from different phone calls that I placed, it was pretty common reference that if you, whether it be the state or the federal government, especially for a county our size, you are behind the curve if you don't have some sort of buddy representing. And that was even coming from the offices about, and I'm sure you've seen it, where sometimes people make an ask and there's not all the detail and the back work in it, is helping get some of that data and the detail actually presented right to them. I think that the idea would be for them to actually come back, just like we've asked Taylor and Taylor did. We kind of slipped under COVID, but Taylor, I think last fall, gave a presentation to the board that they would be making a yearly presentation. It is in this committee's purview that contract would be managed. And that's why we did with NACO. Coming up, ideally, and naive, we were asking, can we get prepared before we go out to NACO? We decided, and Sharon had brought up, Vice Chair Scher had brought up the idea that we have money in the budget, that we would be more prepared, plus some of the representatives. I think the senator will be there during the time frame during NACO for a separate fly-in, where we would actually just have, instead of being one of 102 counties trying to ask them to see them in a few days, actually give our legislative. What we're a little behind on is practically the community fund projects, or the what referred to as the earmarks. But both firms basically said that will be one of the priorities right off the bat, is try to help with that. So there is numerous things. do believe Cozen was one of the few, and we have the documentation, which I don't believe is in the packet, but their original proposal, and if anybody would like that, we can share that with them. But there was a breakdown in their pricing. Some of it is, we had that conversation too about wanting to have weekly calls or bi-weekly calls, and who would that be with, or how much information do you need to get back, or is the information going to be directed to us specifically, because we aren't really interested in Western resource or things that they have, or in other things about that directed. I think that when we took a step back after that, and what we did is all sat on it for a weekend, came up with some more questions, and came back, and then all had some conversations and talking to other people that are in this business, representatives themselves, kind of got some clearer direction of which way to move. The other firm that did submit on this, very exceptional too. It just came down, we would be this firm has been around for a long time, and it was documented in there. Former Congressman Davis, we would be his first municipal client, and one of the first municipal, first county government, yes, but first any government client, I believe, because the rest of them were private. And one of the things from the other firm, they kept referring to Eugene, Oregon for their relationship for 35 years and everything that they've done. And it sounded like a lot of their clients, when we had dropped having Ferguson in 09, 010, their clients stuck with them. And then that was both in these proposals, is that they learned after 09, when earmarks left, that they would learn how to pivot and help us succeed. So it's one of those things that we had multiple questions to them. They all did a remarkable job. The final two firms did a remarkable job coming back, and I feel more comfortable being able to sit here and explain it to you. If we would have decided that first day, I don't think any one of us probably could have sat here and comfortably said that this is a good use of taxpayers' dollars. And now that we have that out clause, if something changes, that was one of the questions too. With November elections, could you see things changing? How can you get in? We wanted bipartisanship and diverse firms. The final two firms did show that they were bipartisan with Democrats and Republicans, and they both were firms that had a diverse workforce. So I think at the end of the day, the reward outweighed the risk of being the first county government for this firm. One of the other, Congressman Davis will be the point person for this contract. One of the other persons that was on the interview, Kyle, was a former executive director of the Black Caucus, Congressional Black Caucus, and we will be his first government firm too, since he's joined the firm. They both have recently joined that firm. Both finalists did a very good job and made it a tough choice. I just think at the end of the day, we landed on with the proposals, and how Rodney had talked about so many governments don't prepare the documents right for the congressional staffs. And when his last thing, was it 15 of 15 or 30 of 30, that when he submitted those proposals, he got every single one because he knew how to word it and how to move it through. So I found that was what was attractive to the group. And realistically, at the end of the day, this is a contract that we had talked about whether or not, in these earmark situations, like, we all know, we see Congressman LaHood shopping in the stores here, and when Sorensen's is here, Durbin, Duckworth are all here. Is that something that we can not do ourselves? And it became pretty clear and evident the value that they bring to help guide those projects to that delivery point, and that we need it. Plus the average contract, and this is what one of the firms that submitted, is a $10,000 a month retainer is the average contract for a federal contract. The two firms, one firm did submit $120,000, $10,000 a month. We eliminated them in the first interview. I think that was pretty consensus. And their paperwork was fantastic prior to that. So then with Cozen's offer, I think that was very low to start, wanting to be the first county government. And I will give Smith Dawson credit too. Their proposal financially was very competitive, but on the life of the contract, it was $28,000 difference, and all things being equal to that was a consideration financially too, which we had talk about if that did leave us, say in year one, a $30,000 difference from Ferguson's contract to Cozen's contract. If it was identified, because Ferguson made a big proposal about being able to do one grant for free and having grant writers to it. We didn't even understand what grants they were talking about per se, but it's about doing the deep dive internally, then identifying pockets of money or federal agencies that have money. We did talk as a group. This also leaves us some flexibility that if we do need to, there's firms that professionally do that. If this is something outside of the purview of staff, these other firms, both Smith, Dawson, and Cozen, do not necessarily write grants, but they know companies that will help you get to where you can be. So that left us some flexibility in the budget if it is something beyond staff. And it's really to identify legislation. I don't think anybody thought, because one of the things was talked about, just like Taylor Anderson does, putting things on our radar that we should be aware of. One firm talked about how they were going to prep us that we were going to go speak in front of Congress. I don't think anybody in here expects that we're going to go speak in front of Congress for some sort of legislation, but it's not the first year. Yeah, and I did have a state official, another official, county government official the other day, not having representation, whether it be at the state or the federal level, really puts you behind all these other governments that are having a seat at the table. So, and I think we probably will, if this works out well, just switch the fly-in for us to continue to be part of NACO and everything, but have these separate, and I know that's how the bigger counties up in Chicago do it when they go for fly-ins. Even though they're at NACO, they're not flying in to have their meetings with them during NACO. And the proposal, one of the things we did ask them was, what does a day, a fly-in look like? Cozen's was much more like a breakfast, some meetings, getting a pregame, getting it ready after we've prepared your program, meeting to prep you for the meetings, a lunch meeting, and it was more of a standard. The other one that we had, I have no idea how anybody personally could have ever made that meeting. There was so many meetings, and if anybody's ever met in a congressional office, when you have an 11 o'clock meeting, I've never been in an 11 o'clock meeting with them. So I learned to respect, and I really thought both proposals were very thoughtful, and it made it, for me as a county board member, it was a good exercise. It's been a while since I've had to sit through a decision like an interview, even though I do it for work and it doesn't look at it differently. For this thing, both proposals were very good, and it was tough to get down to a consensus because, but at the end of the day, when we met the second time, discussed the questions, and we had numerous conversations in the meantime, it was a unanimous decision to go this direction. So hopefully that answers your question. It's probably more than you asked for, but that's an overview. I mean, it took more out. This was not when I asked the committee to sit something that took us 1 hour and we were done. There was quite a bit of time and multiple Zoom meetings that had happened to. But I mean, that was one of the things from staff too, is really, in the state program, trying to create that. Taylor does help, and I think we heard that at our legislative day where every representative commented on what Taylor does and helps get information to them. Is really help. We've always been a top-notch professional organization. This is, and not saying that staff can't do all this stuff, but with everything else that we ask them to do, this is allowing another tool. Cozen did say, consider us an extension of staff. And that was what the things. And I'm happy to answer any questions. I think that's a good recap of what we had.
Steve or Linda, do either one of you want to make any additional comments?
Well, I guess I would only say that this is the beginning of the process. I mean, we have to do a lot of work. We need to meet folks. We need to understand when they feed information back to us what part we have to play, which is to have things that are shovel ready or whatever it may be. And I also think that as a board, or maybe as a subcommittee of the board, we need to also discuss what are our priorities, because, you know, I have not been part of any discussion like that, and I don't think you can be as successful if you haven't come to the conclusion about which projects you think are most important. I would also like very much to see if they could put us in touch with some businesses that might be interested in locating in Peoria County. I feel like we really could use some new job creators here.
Steve, do you want to make any comments?
Yeah, I ditto on everything that's already been said. It's a journey. The first 90 days of this contract will be a lot of work on some of the board members who will dig in and work with the firm. And we want input from everyone, so it's not just a few board members doing all the work, but the board members will reach out to everyone, make sure that we, as Linda said, we really set our priorities. What are the opportunities? We don't want to churn the world and say, hey, we want to put our name in for 400 projects and get nothing. Let's be very tactical and figure out what aligns with our needs, where the firm can work with us as a county, and what's possible. Because we don't know what's possible. They know what's possible and how to move that part of it. We know what we think we want. So the first 90 days will be to meld that together and then be very transparent, present that out to the rest of the board. Here's what we're doing and why, and it'll keep evolving. Hopefully it's not stagnant year one, after year one. It'll keep evolving. But I'm all in favor of this, and I think it's a good thing for the county.
As Linda and Steve and Jimmy know, I was really on the fence about this for a long time until we got the final proposals and we had a Teams meeting between us to talk about the priorities, because that's the big thing for me, is because I felt like we were just kind of deciding to do this, but we didn't know what we were going to do with it, right? So, but the last conversation we had really helped me fine-tune the way I was feeling, and I actually had in my head the other firm for pretty much most of the time until they answered the additional questions. And those additional questions, just some of the things they said, like what Linda alluded to, is the introducing us to companies that may want to locate here. So there's a lot more to this proposal than just lobbying for us. So, you know, they're talking about also the private sector. So I am going to be in support of this. Valen?
It wasn't a question I previously asked, so I apologize if I'm putting anybody on the spot here, but someone from the committee, if you could speak to flexibility in the contract. So as a new relationship, is there any, does anyone foresee that the scope could change? And if it does, do we remain in these financial boundaries, or does it change the price of the contract?
The only thing that I think, be my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, from our conversations is the contracts for the deep dive scope, legislative agenda, fly-ins, helping us prepare, identify, you know, and as Linda said, that was one of the questions that we had, because another firm that did not supply said, ask the question about economic development, especially like for use for the example of the car battery plants that are going, and that sometimes there's things in the federal government that lobbyists had helped identify to help attract these businesses there. That is all included in the contract. What nobody will say, which I can't imagine it going on any different scopes, the one that is not included that would cost extra and not through either firm that was the finalist would be, but they could put us in touch with a grant writer if there were things beyond our scope or needed more documentation to be done. So that would be the only thing, as if, you know, as Linda stated, we could go for 50 different grants, but if you're not doing them properly, they might identify one or two, but two might be very technical, time-consuming, and we would have to hire somebody outside. That would be the only thing. Actually, I should take that back. The only extra thing that would be potential would be travel. If we were bringing them here multiple times on a monthly basis, we would be responsible for hotels and flights. Like Cozen did say, they're not charging us to fly out to DC. Most of their team was they had Illinois and DC based. Most of the people I think that would actually be coming here to interview us are Illinois based, so it would be a car drive instead of a flight from DC. The other firm was completely DC based, so there would have been travel back here on planes and hotels. But that was all built, most of that, and what they said is they will not travel unless it's pre-approved and the bills are approved before that. So I don't think with the finals, either two firms or Cozen that we chose, that we're looking at extraordinary travel expenses, but we would be on the hook for a hotel if they stayed here that night because they were having early morning meetings and not driving back to Chicago or Springfield area, Taylorville area. So that is what I foresee as the only things that could change. Now, if this is successful and we are going into year 4 or 5, I fully don't expect that 90,000 to probably be the same. I think that was probably a starting point because, as I was told, most of those contracts run minimum $100,000 or $10,000 a month. Those would be the only surprises that are unaccounted for costs that we don't know at the moment.
Any additional? Jennifer?
Essentially, I think what I was getting at when I was asking about the grant-making process was do we have a metric of any sort that we're looking at to deem if we think they're successful? I'm not questioning whether we need them or whether they're a great group. I'm just saying, how as a board are we going to determine if these efforts are proving successful?
So good question, because we talked about that, and what we basically settled on is our ROI. So if we're spending 90,000, we're expecting some money to come back here, or positioned us to be putting them back. Because there's been years that we've missed through no fault of anything. We are expecting a return on our investment. And, most of these firms talked about on a yearly basis how they positioned their clients to be successful and navigate the system. And I think a lot of it is knowing how to navigate the system and be in front of the right person to start that process. And that was really what was driven to us, is about navigating that system. That was a question, how do we define success after 90 days, after 6 months, a year, the 2 and the 3 years? And I think when we sat around and talked, it will decide what the board and future boards have to think. But one of the things was, us being professional, helping staff, being an extension of staff, and positioning ourselves for success. And at the end of the day, ultimately, how much money can we bring back from the federal government to the county of Peoria? And what we deem that as successful, I know the Heights has their own lobbyist that has been pretty successful on some projects. And we had brought it up. There is multiple projects in Peoria County that are in some municipalities. Even if we can help a municipality or an unincorporated area bring something back to the county, that is still a win for the county in general. So we're using this and multiple tools to try to be get us across the finish line and bring things back. Sorry, I'm long-winded today.
Any additional questions? Okay, we're voting on the amendment. All those in favor? Aye. Are there any nays? Okay. Now we're voting on the resolution as amended. Can I get do I need to get a motion? No? Okay. No motion. I do need to? No, you already have it. Okay. All right. So as amended, sorry. Make sure I'm doing this right. All those in favor as amended? Aye. Any nays? Okay. Thank you. Is there any public comment? Miscellaneous? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.